The yeast-and-molasses soil tonic that turns weak garden plants into producers, a 3-generation Lancaster County recipe. My great-grandmother wrote that recipe down exactly once, in the margin of a seed catalog from 1927. Not because she thought people needed to remember it, because she wanted to forget it. Here is what nobody tells you when they talk about old-fashioned soil tonics and fermented feeds and kitchen-made plant boosters. The ones that really work, the formulas that actually changed a harvest, they often came from desperate times. Times when a family's survival hung on whether 6 tomato plants could be coaxed into doubling their yield. Times when you did not have the luxury of failure. And that desperation made people sharp. Made them willing to test things that made no sense on paper. To keep notes on what worked and what turned the soil black and killed everything for 2 years running. My great-grandmother's version was not quite the same as the one you will hear about from other Lancaster County families, and that matters. The differences tell you something important about how to use it. Subscribe if you are the kind of gardener who cares less about what is trendy and more about what actually fills your table. And when you try this, and I hope you do, come back and leave a comment. Tell me if your results match what I am about to describe. I need to know if it still works the way it did for my family. But hold on, there is something critical I need to say before we go any further, and I do not want it to get lost in the details that follow. Most gardeners think they understand fermentation. They think they understand yeast, fermentation, feeding the soil. They are working from half-truths and internet summaries that miss the actual mechanism. The guide I put together, you can find it in the description and pinned right here in the comments. It walks through the real microbiology of what yeast does to soil structure over time, why timing matters for this particular formula, and what my great-grandmother discovered about the wrong way to mix it that actually stunted growth instead of boosting it. That part is not intuitive. Most people get it backwards. Now, the reason her version was different comes down to one practical problem nobody else seemed to talk about. When you live on a farm in the 1920s and you are making something that relies on yeast and molasses and careful temperature control, you are working within extreme constraints. No thermometer on the shelf, no way to check water temperature except by feel, no access to town water that had been treated, and critically, no way to store anything reliably from one season to the next if the recipe called for specific conditions that your cellar could not maintain. So, my great-grandmother modified the standard yeast tonic that was being used by other families in her community. She changed the ratios, she changed when you applied it, and she changed what she mixed it with based on what was most reliable to keep on hand year-round without spoiling or losing potency. The formulas you see repeated online, the ones passed down from other documented sources, they work fine. I have tested them, but they require more active management. They work best if you have access to certain ingredients consistently. And they work fastest if you are willing to apply them in ways that honestly risk burning your soil if you get the mixture wrong. Her version was slower, it was gentler, it took longer to see results, sometimes 2 or 3 weeks instead of 1 week. But it was also harder to wreck. And when you are gardening on a shoestring budget, gardening your way, not someone else's formula, that matters more than speed. The other thing her version did differently was the application timing. Most recipes tell you to pour this tonic right at the root of the plant. Soil drench. Feed the microbes closest to the root system immediately. My great-grandmother did something stranger. She mixed it, but she did not use it right away. She let it sit. And she applied it not to individual plants, but to the entire garden bed, a week before she was going to plant the tomatoes in that space. Think about what that means. You are not trying to rescue a struggling plant. You are trying to build the soil foundation before the plant ever goes in. You are giving the microbial colony time to establish and multiply before the plant's roots arrive to feed them. Before the plant's root exudates even become available, you are working several steps ahead of the plant's growth. That approach requires you to think differently about what a soil tonic actually is. It is not rescue medicine. It is not a boost applied after the problem appears. It is preventative architecture, and the difference between those two things is enormous. Now I need to walk you through exactly what was in her version, why each ingredient mattered, and most importantly, how the timing and application changed the entire conversation about what this formula could do. Because once you understand the mechanism, you can adapt it to your own situation, your own constraints, your own garden. The recipe starts with yeast. Plain baking yeast, the kind you use for bread. A tablespoon is all you need. The yeast itself is a living organism. Saccharomyces cerevisiae, if you want the Latin name, but most of us just called it bread yeast. What matters is that it colonizes soil fast. It breaks down organic matter into forms that plant roots can actually absorb. Without yeast activity in your soil, nitrogen sits locked up in dead leaves and manure. With it, that nitrogen becomes available within weeks, not years. Second ingredient is molasses, 2 tablespoons per gallon. If you cannot find molasses, use sugar, though molasses carries trace minerals that plain sugar does not. Iron, magnesium, potassium. Small amounts, but they matter. The molasses feeds the yeast. You are essentially giving that organism a food source so it multiplies aggressively through the soil profile. The buttermilk comes next. 1 cup if you have it. Some folks skip this entirely and the tonic still works. But buttermilk introduces lactic acid bacteria into the soil. Lactobacillus. These bacteria compete with pathogenic fungi and suppress certain soil diseases. They also improve soil structure, making it crumbly and easier for roots to penetrate. A farmer named Gottfried Muller from over in Ohio used to keep a cow specifically for buttermilk. He said a weak tomato plant taught him more than any extension agent could. The baking soda is critical, and this is where most people make a mistake. 1 teaspoon, not a tablespoon, not a pinch. 1 teaspoon, measured level. It raises the pH of the tonic slightly, which helps the yeast activate. Too much baking soda and you create alkaline conditions that inhibit the bacteria. Too little and the yeast struggles to wake up. The precision matters because you are essentially creating a balanced microbial environment. Water matters as much as any ingredient. 1 gallon, lukewarm. Blood warm, not hot. Heat kills yeast, not cold because cold yeast goes dormant and does not multiply. Lukewarm water from a rain barrel is ideal. If you use tap water, let it sit for 48 hours so the chlorine volatilizes. Some people boil it first, then let it cool to remove chlorine entirely. That works. The point is simple. You are trying to keep everything alive in that bucket. Once you have all 4 ingredients and your water, the mixing method matters too. Pour the water into a clean 5-gallon bucket first. Add the yeast. Let it sit for 2 minutes. The yeast begins to hydrate. Add the molasses next and stir for 30 seconds. Do not stir fast. Slow, deliberate circles. You are dissolving the molasses and distributing the yeast evenly. Add the buttermilk. Stir again. Last, the baking soda. Add it slowly, because it will cause a slight fizz. That fizz is carbon dioxide being released by the reaction between the baking soda and the lactic acid in the buttermilk. It looks dramatic. It is actually just chemistry doing what it is supposed to do. Now comes the part that separates this from something you just pour straight onto the soil. You let it sit. Cover it loosely with cloth so dust does not fall in, but air can still reach it. Leave it at room temperature for 12 hours. Overnight works perfectly. During those 12 hours, the yeast is waking up, dividing, consuming the molasses. The bacteria are multiplying. The whole bucket becomes a tiny fermentation chamber. By morning, the surface will have a thin layer of foam. That foam is yeast activity. That is what you want to see. Some people ask if you can use it immediately. You can. It will work. But waiting those 12 hours multiplies the microbial population by orders of magnitude. A tonic applied after fermentation does 10 times the work of one applied immediately. I have tested both. I have watched 2 tomato plants side by side. One fed the fermented version, one fed the raw version. The difference is plain. Hold on, because this is where I need to draw your attention to something most folks overlook entirely. The complete guide to soil fermentation, microbial timing, application sequences, and how to adapt this formula to different soil types and different crops is explained in full detail in our in-depth ebook. That guide covers mechanisms, timing adjustments, troubleshooting, and variations that simply cannot fit into a video this length. If you want to understand not just how to do this, but why it works at the level that will let you teach it to someone else, that ebook is available in the description and pinned in the top comment. The application itself is simple, but timing changes everything. You apply this tonic to the soil around the base of the plant, not to the leaves. 1 cup per plant, poured slowly so it soaks in rather than running off. Apply it once every 2 weeks during the growing season, spring through early fall. After the plant has been in the ground for 1 week, it is ready to receive the tonic. Apply it before the plant flowers. Apply it while it is flowering. Apply it while it is fruiting. What you are doing is continuously replenishing the microbial population that the plant itself is consuming. Roots exude sugars. Microbes eat those sugars. Microbes convert soil minerals into plant-available forms. The plant feeds those forms to the fruit. You are not feeding the plant. You are maintaining the invisible ecosystem that feeds the plant. The application itself is simple, but timing changes everything. You apply this tonic to the soil around the base of the plant, not to the leaves. 1 cup per plant, poured slowly so it soaks in rather than running off. Apply it once every 2 weeks during the growing season, spring through early fall. After the plant has been in the ground for 1 week, it is ready to receive the tonic. Apply it before the plant flowers. Apply it while it is flowering. Apply it while it is fruiting. What you are doing is continuously replenishing the microbial population that the plant itself is consuming. Roots exude sugars. Microbes eat those sugars. Microbes convert soil minerals into plant-available forms. The plant feeds those forms to the fruit. You are not feeding the plant. You are maintaining the invisible ecosystem that feeds the plant. This is the part where most gardeners miss the whole picture. They think that if the soil looks brown and smells earthy, it must be alive. But soil without active microbes is just dirt, dead, brown but hollow. The microbial activity is what determines whether a plant thrives or merely survives in that ground. Your tomato plant is not separate from the soil. It is an extension of it. What happens below the surface is what determines what happens above. 1 application of this tonic will show you green in the leaves within days. 2 applications will show you thicker stems. 3 applications will show you early flowers. 4 applications will show you fruit that sizes faster and tastes better than anything you have bought. But here is something that catches people off guard. Once you start this practice, you cannot go back to thinking about gardening the old way. You will see a neighbor's pale, struggling plant, and you will know exactly what it needs. You will stand in a garden store and realize that almost every packaged fertilizer on the shelf is working against this principle, not with it. That is not a judgment, it is just clarity. You cannot unsee it. Now, before we continue, I need you to understand something crucial about how this tonic fits into the larger picture of soil health. The yeast-and-molasses tonic is one piece of a much wider approach to farmstead gardening that my family has refined over generations. There are signals in your soil that tell you when to apply it, patterns in plant growth that reveal what is working and what is not, and mechanisms behind crop rotation and seasonal timing that make the difference between a mediocre harvest and an exceptional one. All of that knowledge is gathered in a guide I have prepared, available in the description and pinned in the comments section. It covers the deeper framework, the principles that explain why this tonic works, how to read your soil, and how to apply these methods to whatever you are growing. If you want to truly master these techniques and not just follow them, that guide will take you there. It is a paid resource, and it exists for people who are serious about changing their approach. There are 3 mistakes people make when they first try this. First mistake, they mix it too hot or too cold. Temperature matters because it controls how quickly the yeast wakes up. Blood warm, remember. Not guessing at it. If you have a thermometer, use it. 98 to 100 degrees is the window. Second mistake, they wait too long to apply it after mixing. Once you stir it together, the yeast begins consuming the molasses immediately. You have about 30 minutes to use it before the activity peaks and then declines. Mixing a batch and letting it sit overnight defeats the whole purpose. Third mistake, and this one frustrates me because it is so preventable. They apply too much. 1 cup per plant, not 1.5, not a whole bucket. More is not better. Overfeeding the microbial population can acidify the soil and create an imbalance. Your goal is consistency, not excess. The rhythm of application matters as much as the recipe itself. On a small homestead where you might have 6 or 8 tomato plants, 2 applications per month is enough to keep them producing steadily through the season. If you have more plants, you can mix larger batches. The recipe scales cleanly. 2 gallons uses 2 tablespoons of yeast, 4 tablespoons of molasses, 2 cups of buttermilk, and 2 teaspoons of baking soda. 3 gallons uses 3 times the base amounts. Keep the proportions exact and the result is identical. A lot of people ask whether they can use this tonic on other crops. The answer is yes, with adjustment. Tomatoes benefit most because they are heavy feeders with long growing seasons. But beans, peppers, squash, and even root vegetables respond to it. With beans and peas, start the applications after flowering begins. With root crops like beets and carrots, 1 or 2 applications mid-season will deepen the sugars and improve the flavor. With peppers, treat them like tomatoes. Same timing, same volume. Cabbage and other brassicas are different. They do not need this tonic as urgently because they are not as dependent on consistent microbial support. A single application when the plant is half-grown is usually enough. Leafy greens like spinach and lettuce are too short-seasoned to benefit. By the time the microbial boost would pay off, you are harvesting. Now, the question every gardener asks once they see this work is whether the timing matters as much as I have said. The answer is yes, it matters completely. Early applications, when the plant is small, build the foundation of a healthy root system. The microbes colonize the soil around the young roots and establish their networks before the plant demands heavy feeding. By mid-season, when the tomato is flowering and setting fruit, those networks are already in place and working. The second and third applications reinforce that system when the plant's hunger is highest. Skip the early dose and rush straight to mid-season, and you will see improvement, but not the full transformation. The spacing between applications matters too. 10 to 14 days is the sweet spot. Closer together and you risk feeding the microbes faster than the plant can use them. Wider apart, and the tonic loses its momentum. The microbes live for a season, not indefinitely. You are not building permanent change. You are maintaining an active population while the plant needs it most. Once the plant has set most of its fruit and the heavy growing stops, you can stop applying the tonic. The plant is past its peak demand. Further applications waste the mixture. Storage is practical, not complicated. The tonic keeps in a cool place for up to 3 days if you have made more than you need. A gallon goes a long way. In summer heat, do not leave it sitting in direct sun. The warmth will wake up the yeast faster than you can use it, and the tonic will lose its strength. A basement corner, a shed, even a shaded garden bench works fine. Cover it loosely so air reaches it, but dust does not. Before we go deeper into the troubleshooting, I need to pause here and flag something that changes how you see this whole method. The tonic works because it restarts a conversation between the plant and the soil that modern gardening has largely interrupted. Chemical fertilizers fed the plant directly and killed the microbes that should have been doing the feeding naturally. Your grandfather's generation understood this without needing science to explain it. They watched it happen. We have to relearn it because we stopped watching. If you want the full picture of why this works, the underlying biology, the history of how we lost this knowledge in the first place, and the ways to adapt this recipe to different soil types and regional water conditions, that is all in the ebook guide available in the description and pinned in the top comment. It goes far deeper than I can in a single video. Many gardeners have told me that guide is where the whole system finally clicked for them. One more thing comes up often: chlorinated water from the tap. I mentioned avoiding it, but what if that is all you have? You have 2 options. Fill your watering can and let it sit overnight, uncovered, in the sun. The chlorine will evaporate. It takes about 12 to 18 hours. Or collect rainwater when you can. Many of us keep a simple rain barrel, or even a plastic trash can set under the downspout. It collects free water and gives you exactly what the tonic needs. Even half a gallon of rain per week is better than none. Use what you have. Gardening is not about perfection. It is about working with what your land offers. Some gardeners worry that because the recipe is so simple, they must be missing something. They are not. The simplicity is the point. Your great-grandmother could make this. She did make versions of it. Yeast was less reliable then. Living starters from bread making were used instead. Molasses was in every pantry. Buttermilk came from the churn. Baking soda was there for cleaning and baking. The ingredients have not changed. Only the source has changed. We buy them now instead of making them, but the formula is unchanged because it works. A thing does not need to be complicated to be powerful. Now comes the part that separates the gardeners who understand soil from those who simply buy bags. You apply this tonic twice. First application happens when you plant the tomato. You dig your hole. You pour 1 cup of the tonic into the bottom of that hole before the seedling goes in. The roots encounter it immediately. The yeast begins its work at once. The molasses feeds the bacteria. The soil wakes up. Second application comes 4 weeks later. By then, the first feeding has multiplied through the soil. The plant is growing. You pour another cup right around the base, about 6 inches from the stem, never against the stem itself. The soil draws it down. The work continues. 2 applications per plant. That is all. No weekly feeding, no constant tinkering. 2 cups of tonic per tomato and you are done. I have watched people spend $20 a month on bottled fertilizer all summer and still harvest weak fruit. I have watched others spend nothing and pull down 3 times the tomatoes. The difference is not luck, it is not genetics, it is soil that understands what a plant needs because the soil itself is alive and fed properly. This is the secret I promised you at the beginning, not some hidden ingredient, not some mysterious technique passed down through locked diaries. The secret is that you stop thinking like a person trying to force a plant to grow, and you start thinking like a farmer tending the ground itself. The plant is secondary. The soil is primary. Feed the soil twice, and the soil feeds the plant all season long. Most gardeners never see this moment because they never try anything different. They do what they did last year and get what they got last year. But if you make this tonic, if you apply it twice, you will stand in front of your garden in mid-July and see something shift. The plant will be thicker at the stem, the leaves will hold a deeper green, the flowers will come earlier, the fruit will set faster. You will look at that plant and know something changed. And it changed because you fed the life in your soil, not because you forced the plant. One final word. Do not overthink this. The tonic works with any tomato variety. Cherry tomatoes, beefsteaks, paste tomatoes, heirlooms. It works because you are not fighting against the plant's nature. You are working with the soil's nature. That is all. Make the recipe exactly as written. Use rainwater if you can. Apply it twice. Watch what happens. This week, if you have tomato plants in the ground or in containers, make this tonic today. Pour the first application this evening. You will know by late July whether it was worth your time. I suspect you will be surprised. Thank you for watching. If this method works for you, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next video, and ring that notification bell so every new upload reaches you the day it goes live.